Welcome everybody. Today we are going to start Unit 4, which is all about factoring. All right, for today, our goal for today, given a polynomial, you will be able to simplify it using greatest common factor, GCF, factoring. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, before we get to our day one goal, let's talk about this idea of, well, our entire unit is called factoring. So what does it mean to factor? Well, factor means you are going to simplify by breaking down into smaller parts. Okay, so we're trying to take an expression and we're trying to break it into its smaller parts. And the way that we do that is by finding what to multiply together to get that expression. All right, so that is what we're going to be doing over the next many days. Today, we're going to focus on our first type of factoring, which if we take a look is called greatest common factor factoring. All right, so let's go ahead and flip to our notes for today. All right, now before we start factoring, let's just review what is a GCF, a greatest common factor. And this is something that you talked about way back in 6th grade. A greatest common factor, which we tend to abbreviate GCF. So a GCF is the largest number that will divide evenly into a set of numbers. Also, the highest power of every variable that is in each monomial. So let's go ahead and let's practice just finding the GCFs. So what is the greatest common factor of 30, 18, and 48? So let's think for a minute. What are numbers that divide into 30? So let's think. We could go and it could be 2 and 15. So 2 times 15. We could do 3 and 10. 3 times 10 would give you 30. 6 and 5, that would give you 30. Or we could do 1 and 30 would give you 30. Now let's take a look at 18. So what are numbers that divide into 18? Well, let's see. 2 goes into 18. 9 goes into 18. 3 goes into 18. And 6 goes into 18. 1 and 18. So those are all numbers that go into 18. Okay, now let's try 48. So 48, what goes into 48? 2 goes into 48, and it's 2 times 24 would go into 48. Let's see, will 3 go into 48? So remember, if you don't know for sure, you can always take out your calculator and double check. So 48 divided by 3, it would go in 16 times. So 3, and that also means 48 divided by 16 would also go into it. Let's see, 48 divided by 4, so we could go 4 and 12. So 48 divided by 5, nope. 48 divided by 6, yep, so then 6, 8, and then we could also do 1 and 48. Okay, so we just broke it down. There's a lot of numbers. Now, the greatest common factor. So what's the biggest number that goes into all 3 of them? Well, 2 goes into all 3 of them, but that's not very big. Let's see if there's a bigger one. All right, I see I have a 6 that goes into 30, a 6 that goes into 18, and 6 goes into 48. So my GCF here is going to be 6. It's the biggest number that goes in to all 3 of these. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. What is the greatest common factor of 15x squared, 25x to the third, and 50x to the fourth? So let's find the GCF. So first, look at the numbers, 15, 25, and 50. What's the biggest number that goes into all 3 of those? Well, let's see. 5 goes in here, 5 goes in here, 5 goes, so 5 goes into all of them, and 10 does not. So my GCF is going to be 5. Now, what else do all 3 of these have in common? They all have an x in common. So if I take a look at 15x squared, so x squared means there are going to be 2 x's, x times x. X to the third, that means there's going to be 3 x's, x times x times x. Here, there's x to the fourth, so there's 4 x's. All right, so how many x's do they have in common? Well, this one has 2, this one has at least 2, and this one has at least 2. So they have 2 x's in common, so they have x squared in common because x times x is x squared. X times x is x squared. X times x is x squared. And then here, there's no other x's, and then this would be times x times x times x. So they have x squared in common. Okay, let's try another one now. Let's put it all together. What is the GCF of 10x squared y to the third and 15xy squared? So let's find our GCF. So look first at the numbers, 10 and 15. So what is a number that goes into 10 and 15? All right, that it would be correct, 5. Okay, now let's look at the variables. Here we have 2 x's, but over here, how many x's do we have? There's only 1. So how many x's do they have in common? They only have 1 in common, so we're going to put an x here. Now let's look at our y's. Here we have y to the third, so there's 3 y's here. Here we have y squared, that means there's 2 y's there. So how many y's can they have in common? Well, they're going to have 2 y's in common. Okay, this one has 3, this one has 2, so you can't have more in common, so you have to go with the lower power here. All right, so now that we've practiced a little bit with GCF, I would like you to try one question on your own. Okay, so what is the GCF of, ready? Okay, we're going to go with 16x to the third, and let's try 12x squared. So go ahead, pause your video, and figure this out. All right, so if we think of a number that goes into 16 and 12, the biggest number is 4. And then if you look at the variables, x to the 3, x to the 2, they have 2 x's in common, so 4x squared. Okay, so now that we know how to find our GCF, now we're going to learn how to factor using GCF. Factor using greatest common factor. When factoring polynomials, first look for the largest monomial, which is a factor of each term of the polynomial. Factor out, divide out each term by this largest monomial. Okay, so this is factoring using GCF. Okay, so the first thing we do is look for the largest monomial that is a factor. So here we're going to do, here's my little think bubble, let's think. Step 1, find the GCF. 4x plus 8y. So what's a number that goes into 4 and 8? Well, that would be 4. Now, this term has an x, this term has a y. Are those common? No, they're not. So our GCF is just 4. Okay, so now step 2, factor out, divide each term by this largest monomial. So we're going to divide out 4. Okay, so our GCF is 4, so I'm going to divide both of those by 4. So 4x divided by 4 is just x. 8y divided by 4 is going to be 2y. And then the plus sign stays in the middle. Now, remember, factoring is finding what multiplies together to get an expression. So what do? We factored out a 4, which means to get back to my original, I would have to multiply by the 4 that I divided out, so I put that on the outside. All right, and ladies and gentlemen, you have just factored using GCF. Okay, now I'm going to show you a quick way to check your work. So to check, you're going to write down your solution. And what we're going to do is we're going to simplify it. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 4. So 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 2y is 8y. Is that what we started with originally? Yes, it is. So you did it correct. So by distributing, you can always check your work. So really, factoring using GCF can also be called reverse distribution. You're just distributing backwards. You're taking the number and you're putting it on the outside instead of multiplying it inside. Okay, so let's take a look at our next one. So step one, here's my think bubble. We have to find the GCF. So let's take a look, 10 and 15. So what number goes into both of those? 5. Now take a look, this is x squared and this is x to the first power. So how many x's do they have in common? Just one, because this is x to the first power. Now y to the third, y squared, so this one has 3 y's, this one has 2 y's, so how many do they have in common? They have 2, so y squared. So now I'm going to divide it out. So divide 5x squared, x to the first power, y squared. Divide by 5x y squared. So let's go ahead and divide it out. 15 divided by 5 is 3. X squared divided by x, so remember you subtract the exponents, 2 minus 1 is 1, so x. Y to the third divided by y squared, remember subtract the exponents, 3 minus 2 is 1, so we get y to the 1. Okay, and then plus 10 divided by 5 is 2. X to the 1, those cancel. Y squared, those are going to cancel. So we have it. Now remember, we're finding what multiplies together to get an expression. So I'm going to take this and multiply it by the GCF. Okay, and we have our final answer right there. So we found what multiplies together. Now, if we want to check, we can check this. So I'm going to rewrite my answer. And then we're going to multiply it and distribute. So 5 times 3 is 15. X times x is x squared. Y squared times y is y to the third. Now I'm going to multiply to the 2. Plus 5 times 2 is 10. Now there's no x's or y's, so that is just going to stay the same. And then if I double check, does that match? Yes, it does. So we've got it. Okay, let's go ahead and practice a few more. So if I take a look at number 1, what is the GCF here? So GCF in this case is going to be 5. So now we're going to take that 5 and we divide both of these by 5. So the 5's divide out. We get just a plus b. Then we're going to take that GCF, we're going to put it back in the front, and we've just factored it out. Now if I want to, I can do this in my head. 5 times a, 5a. 5 times b, 5b, and we've got it. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to skip number 2. It's a little bit. Let's take a look then at number 3. So first thing you have to do is figure out what is your GCF. So between 3 and 6, what's the biggest number that goes into 3 and 6? Well, that would be 3. We have a to the first, a to the second, so your GCF is just a. B squared, b, so this is to the first power. So how many b's do they have in common? Just 1. So there's my GCF. So now I divide both of these by 3ab, 3ab. 3 goes into 3 once. Okay, so that's a 1. A's are going to cancel. B squared divided by b leaves us with just b. Minus 6 divided by 3 is 2. A squared divided by a is a. And b to the 1, those are going to cancel. Now I'm putting parentheses around here because I need to find what multiplies together, and I put my 3ab in the front, and we've got it. All right, I'd like you to take a look now at number 4, and on your own, I'd like you to figure out what is your GCF. All right, were you able to get a GCF of 2x? All right, so then we're going to come over here then and divide everything by 2x. So here we're going to get x squared minus, here we're going to get minus 2x. 8 divided by 2 is 4. The x's are going to cancel. Put parentheses around there and put your GCF in the front. Okay, I'd like you to go ahead now and try number 5 on your own. All right, see, were you able to get 6x 1 minus 4x. All right, go ahead, try number 6 on your own. Okay, this time they didn't have a number in common, but they did have an x in common. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good job today. See you in class tomorrow.